All right, hello everybody. Welcome to today's show. What we got here today is probably something I've maybe explained before a whole bunch of lessons back, but never with this detail. So, what we're going to kind of talk about is not kind of talk about, but actually talk about is taking triad shapes on the 4, 3, and 2 strings, three easy to know shapes that'll get you your chords from one end of the fretboard to the other, including helping you find your way through caged. But that was in another lesson. But should kind of appear to you once you get familiar with these shapes. Anyways, but the point is how to take them into scales. Well, let me put this the other way: how to make them a one chord, how to fit them into the major scale. So to play them as a one chord, a four chord, or a five chord. Why not any of the other chords? Well, we're dealing with major today. So in major, we're dealing with the one, the four, and the five as the major chords of a major scale. And if you don't know what that means, stick around because it'll get explained in this lesson. And there is a way that came to me the other day that I think does make it pretty easy to do that. And not only be able to instantly play one of these chord shapes as a one, a four, or a five chord. And you could figure this out for minor once you can figure it out for major, basically. But maybe we'll make a separate lesson for that. But it makes it easy and instantaneous almost, and helps you get it all across the fretboard. So let's dive right in and explore. So the first slide we have here, or first page, is well, the first thing we kind of want to know. We want to know what are these chord shapes we're talking about. What are these three shapes that we're talking about today? And it's the same shapes that we've gone over before on the channel in the same order that I like to use them in. Notice this straight up and down shape. I like to place that in the middle and have this shape on one side and this shape on the other to kind of give you like a wall shape. And in the background here, we have what you should notice is the five shapes of the pentatonic all glued together as they are on the fretboard. So it might look like a jumble of yellow notes here, or what are supposed to be notes, right? We're not using a fretboard diagram in the background today. Just didn't think it would be too necessary. I think everybody kind of gets how this works today. So for example, with this first shape, we've got starting on the 5th fret, we would have 1 4 1 4 1 3 1 3, a 1 3, but on the 6th and 8th fret, then 5 and 8, 5 8 5 8, 5 7 5 7, 6 8 5 8. So you get the idea of how this relates to our guitar fretboard. So we have these three shapes. Let's just hear those independently and hear them together. Let's put this our straight up and down right on the 12th fret. We're going to deal with the 12th fret a lot today because it helps us get our note names easy, because we all know the notes of the 12th fret because it's the same as the open guitar strings. And when we're dealing with the strings 4, 3, and 2, we know we're dealing with D, G, and B. So we got that. Now there's some real estate to cover when you are going from one of these shapes. And if you find yourself struggling to know exactly where it is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Remember the octave link here, that this note, the top note of the shape, there's always a link to the one shape by using that octave visualization. So if I was here and I wanted to go here, but I kind of was, maybe I'm my chord is down here in an unknown sort of new territory that I haven't played very much yet, and I wanted to know where the shape was. Well, I'm going to think I'm going to skip 2 frets, and I know that's the bottom note of my next shape. And then going backwards the other way, I'm going to use this note and think about this note as the top note of my other shape. So there we have our shapes and the way to find them quick and easy on the fretboard. Here we are back at the 12th fret. And that should tell you this is G. How do we know that? Let's concentrate. One thing we want to know with all these shapes is where our 1 is. For today's lesson, you should also know that above a 1 is always a 5, below the 1 is always a 3. So if that's a 5, that's a 3. So this goes 3, 5, 1. This goes 5, 1, 3, and this is your 1, 3, 5. Now, say, good question there for a beginner would be like, well, how can those be the same chord? All the notes are jumbled up. Don't they have to be lowest to highest? They technically don't, to at least represent the same chord. You can go deep into theory, you can add different roots and create different chord spellings and go down all kinds of rabbit holes if you want to get technical and you want to confuse people. But for our intents and purposes, these are all the same chord. Even with the notes jumbled, they all work as the same chord, especially for guitar rockers, right? Or pop artists, if you will. So anyways, we want to know where our 1 is. So in this shape, our 1 is right in the middle. Our middle shape has the 1 in the middle. Kind of neat. Our first shape has the 1 up there. And is that down or up? It's hard to say. It's up as far as sonically. But whatever. Let's just call that, we'll call this up and this down for today. Whatever. So we have the 1 there, and in this shape we have the 1. You want to know, just simply memorize in each of these shapes where the 1 is. Great. Also, the next thing we want to kind of take a look at here, this is going to come up in more detail, that this big square part, or rectangular, should I say, part of the pentatonic scale is actually in quite a few places, and that's going to be our focus today. We are going to use that as our tool, and we're going to call that the container. So let's move on to sheet number 2. Do you got it? Do you got where your shapes are? Oh, this is what I wanted to say. I knew there was something before I went. Now, a couple of things, a whole bunch of things. This is the pentatonic. This is how these shapes go into the pentatonic. Now, the neat thing about this is worth memorizing hard and fast because they don't fit in any other place. So it's not like you can use different pentatonics because these chord shapes are only going to fit in this one spot. Now, a good question right there is, well, Mark, if these only fit into one spot on the pentatonic, how can they work as 3 different chords? Wouldn't they have to be in different spaces? Well, that's true, and how it works is the actual pentatonic system, let's call this whole thing a system, right? A system of 5 shapes. The pentatonic system fits into the major scale in 3 different places. That's the geometric magic. So not anything we have to worry about, but there's your explanation as to how that can be possible. So what this gives you, if you just play around with these notes in the pentatonic scale without going diatonic, meaning adding the 2 more notes that are missing to give a 5-note scale, and get a 5-note scale into a 7-note scale, the diatonic scale. Just to stay pentatonic gives you a freedom. That means that these notes can work as improv notes around these chords. You have chord tones and stepping stone notes that are leaving out the 2 important notes that give you an ambiguous sound. Like an open freedom kind of sound, because this can be used over, you're not defining 1, 4, or 5. You're leaving this open to be any of those chords. So this can work if you get confused, if you didn't know which, if this was a 1, 4, or 5, you just knew like the chord, you were on a major, you needed a major chord and you knew how to find it. So for example, if I needed a B flat, well, I might look at, I know my easiest B flat is going to be on this string right here. Here's the B. Here's a B flat. So I'm going to use the one with the root note. on my second string, which is this shape right here. So we're going to go, I know I'm playing in B flat. Now if I want to improvise and I don't necessarily know what chord it is, I stay out of the gut notes, and I don't even have to think about staying out of the gut notes because, or the two diatonic specific notes, we're just playing this pentatonic shape. Whoops, sorry. And I think it kind of gives you that, my tone is horrible for that kind of sound right now, but it gives you that kind of initial Jimi Hendrix kind of lick thing where I modify my tone a little bit there. Let's try this. That's a little too thin, I think. I'm right here thinking about this pentatonic shape and these yellow notes right here. And I made a point of making the line move to the root to give it that sense of me being done with my little noodling there. So anyways, yeah. So that gives you that. That's a great thing, and you could stop this lesson right here and just learn that for today. That would be probably a great thing if you didn't know that. But if you want to go even deeper, well, keep following along. So the next thing we want to know is that container. Let's call this big shape here the container. Let's see how it's in every pentatonic. And right, what we have here is this same series of 5 shapes, but you can see them better because I've split them apart. What this does when you split them apart is it kind of gives you this idea that these are separate entities, and that when you're in one shape you have to think about finding the next shape, but you don't, because you are connected into there. But for display purposes and the ease of explanation and understanding, we split them apart like this. So what I wanted to show is that in each of the 5 shapes you have this container. It's not just in this one, and that'll come up later. However, we don't really need to use this one too much, even though it's a shape that we'll be using per se, but this container is kind of up out of the way. But we definitely use this container, which is the toughest container to manage because, as you can see, it's the shifted broken container that moves over the G and B string tuning anomaly. I call it a tuning anomaly, whatever. It's just the way the guitar's tuned. And then these are more of a quote-unquote perfect container here in this shape, and this shape, this shape being on the shape that does occur to the left side of this, to the headstock side of this shape, and to the bridge side of that shape. So let's say that we know that. Oh, and now one of these notes is green. Don't let that throw you off. We do want to consider this as one big rectangular structure, and that's where container, that's what we're going to call this, the container. So remember that word. I like that now better than rectangle. Container. This contains the information we're going to work on in a little bit. And the green note is our important note. That's a 1. Now you have all 3 chord tones. You have the 1, the 3, and the 5 in this shape, and that can be helpful to know. But for simplicity's sake, we're only going to elucidate the one, and we're not going to label it the one. We're just going to put that green note there for our. You want to strongly consider or understand where that particular note is for what's coming up. Let's move on. So some things we're going to need to know for the rest of this lesson. What is the theory that we're going to need to know? This is theory. Let's not be afraid of it. But it's, I don't know, you tell me if this is too confusing. Now, what I've got here is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I opted not to use the C major scale because that tends to lock people's thinking into one place, one key, the C major. And this, I wanted to be free of that because you can do this anywhere, know what key you're in, and be able to improvise all over your neck and not necessarily have to know what sharps, what flats are in the key. That automatically happens. You don't need to know all that stuff. And if you're strong with memorization, there is reasons and times to know that information. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think that a lot of teachers only go with a strict definition in that direction of, well, you have to know the note names and the sharps or flats, maybe because that's the only way they know how to describe all these concepts. And I don't think that that helps my students when they see a much easier way to get these things done, especially if you are a visual learner like my channel, Visual Guitar Methods. So instead we've used do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, because you've heard that before and you understand that as a major scale. And the visualization is here on a piano keyboard, so you can kind of see how the sharps and flats can be visualized in your mind by visualizing a piano keyboard. On a piano keyboard, that is the key of C major, so it's kind of implied there anyways, but it's just kind of an option. I just did that. It's not really important for today, but it's just kind of a nice correspondence there to solidify and help anchor some of your thinking. Excuse me. So moving on, we have down below, now this corresponds, these rows correspond. I did skip a row there for kind of, make it everything a little clearer, I guess, or clarity. But down below, that is an I for Ionian. What we have here on this, and I should have put a little list right there. This is the, should have put major scale here. Then this is modes, the mode names. And this is our Nashville numbers. And this is our key of sharps, our code of sharps and flats, should I say. I don't want to use the word key and get confused here. So the first letters stand for the modal name. So Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. The Ionian corresponds to the one of our key, our one, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We're going to just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Octave. Okay. Forgive my singing if it's something horrible, but so we've got the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, and the 6. And that's all we're going to worry about today. We're not even going to consider the Locrian mode. You can see right down here, it's a different chord than major and minor. It's called a diminished chord. It's very easy. That the fifth of the chord is flat. That weird kind of always leading to the 1. Anyways, we don't want to get deep into theory and lose you, so let's just say we're not dealing with that today. All we got to deal with is our 3 major and 3 minor chords. Kind of cool. A bunch of 3s. 3s are always important. Just incidentally, and I always say this, I think, when I come to this point, I used to teach driving, and I would teach driving, and I would show people how the number 3 was so important in so many things in driving, even though your car has 4 wheels. Oh, I'll show myself out later. Anyways, so it really was when you try to remember things, concepts, 1, 2, 3, makes it easy. But anyways, so here's 3 popping up again. But anyways, so 3 major, 3 minor, but they're in an order: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. You do want to kind of know that the first chord of the scale is major. We're going to be dealing with the 4th chord of the scale is major, and the 5th chord of the scale is major. So what this implies, or the implications are to us today, that this major chord shape that we're learning can fit as a 1 chord in the key. That could be my 1. It could be my 4. It could be my 5, or my 1. If that progression sounds familiar, because 1, 4, 5 is so common in the rock and roll sphere. And so let's move on from there. Now, the next thing we want to know, aside from this is where people get confused about modes, because there's a modal order this way. And so yeah, it follows the scale. First you have Ionian, then you have Dorian and Phrygian. The same way you have a major chord, then a minor mode for the minor, which is coming out of the minor chord. That's why there's that relationship there. Minor mode, major mode, major mode, minor mode. Where do they come from? They come from this. Why is it like that? It's the same reason the way the chords are built. And we've gone over why the chords are built that way. So I'm always trying to keep the people that just tune into these lessons, they find my stuff from nowhere, and the new guitarists to music theory are just lost on all these basics. So you'll have to go back and watch some other of my videos if you're stuck on why the 2nd chord is minor. What makes that minor? What makes the 3rd one minor and the 4th one major? Why would that be? It's not hard at all, but it's something for another lesson, because you guys know that have been here a while how long my lessons can go when I try to explain everything. So, and for this lesson, it's not that important to you can just say, okay, I don't know why, but it is what it is. Let's keep moving. So that's what you should do if you're in that position as a student watching this. So the next thing you do want to know is to the actual emotional organization of modes. There is a pairing of modes in an emotional sense, and the awesomest thing, the craziest thing, is that this emotional pairing is also part of the geometry of your fretboard. It's crazy. And this relates to, if when you hear people talk about, this amazing thing they're finding in the circle of fifths, and how there's this pattern and everything. It's all the same thing. These geometries are almost like what we're hearing. So anyways, you're hearing good math when you hear good music, by the way. So that's this, without losing ourselves in massive physical explanations, we can just think, well, cool. to be quite honest with you, just go cool. So here I've color coded these pairs. So what are these pairs? The pairs are major and minor, because remember there's 3 major and 3 minor, and they work like pairs with each other. So with the moods you want to understand like this. There's a neutral mood, there's a lighter mood to each scale, and there is a darker mood to each scale. So for example, there are 3 major scales that are on the top here, are named Lydian, Ionian, and Dorian for the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. In minor, we have the 2 chord, the 6 chord, and the 3 chord. That doesn't really matter, but these are these where they come from, and they are paired together in the way that, let's just talk about major here. In the same way major has just a flavorless or a very neutral vanilla flavored major is in the center here. That's the happy birthday major scale, do re mi fa sol la ti do. But we also have a Lydian scale that would sound something like this. Now, when you play them like that, there's only one note difference. So it's sort of for a beginner, sometimes beginners, you don't even hear that. And if you get a little familiar with it, you're hearing it, but it doesn't really um, stand out that much. And you wonder, well, what the hell are the big differences with these notes? Where do they, who even uses this? And why is this even important to me? And why would I want to remember this? Because when these things start building into harmonies, melodies, and chords that come from these, that's when the emotion really starts to pour out of these structures, these geometric, mathematical, whatever, structures of sound, of of simple notes, of the, what was I going to say, like the frequency of these. My eyes just went crazy. Structures of frequencies. It's because I'm always looking at my screen instead of my camera. Anyway, so these structures of sound, the frequencies of individual notes. So when you got everything together, and we're just going to talk about major now, even though you can see there's a minor pairing with each one. Um, Ionian, Lydian is the lighter one. You can see I've marked down here lighter, and I've color coded it like a nice light blue. And I think about this like I remember I did this in the beginning and it helped me like instantly like go, oh, okay, I see this now. The eyebrows. We've got the smile for major, the frown for minor, but really what tells us, informs us about the emotion. Why would this frown be different from this frown? It's in the eyebrows, right? We have a more upward facing eyebrow is more melancholic or light at the end of the tunnel, kind of sad if we're talking about minor. Straight out, somewhat serious minor, and then a more aggressive minor. Same with the major scale. It's a happy major scale, but it's a little more aggressive. We got this. Oops, sorry. That one note difference makes that happen as soon as you start bringing out the harmonies and the chords of these scales. Okay, because of that one note, it creates a whole different. It's the same notes of the major scale, but because everything is organized differently, falls into different places. The tonalities are pulling to. You're moving the gravity around. And what I mean by moving the gravity around is moving the root note around, moving the home base where all the notes are being compared to. That's called like the tonal center. You think about a center of a planet is where what we think, where as far as what we know, gravity comes from, or so it's like what everything's pulling to, the tonal center. When you shift these tonal centers around by just shifting these one notes, that's where these emotions come from. Let's move on and not conceptualize in a little bit. So for lighter and darker, we've got these shapes on the board corresponding to the shapes that we talked about earlier on this, the containers. That's right, containers. So these containers that are in this spot are these. They are, within these containers, you can make, by adding the two notes, you can turn those containers into Ionian, Lydian, or Mixolydian. And if you're playing a chord, the minor chord, that still is in relation to those containers, and I'll show you how it relates in a little bit. You could make with the one pairing of notes, it's going to be Dorian. Easy, and let me say it like this: in one easy to remember geometric stack of notes is going to be Dorian. Easy to remember balanced geometric stack is going to be Aeolian. And shifted to the other side of the boat, we have the darker side, Phrygian. And this shape, one shape, works for either major or minor. You ask right there, how can that be? Because we have different root notes. A root note for a major and a root note for a minor chord. And so when we are playing today, we're going to play with the root notes that have to do with our major chords. So let's move on. So here they are. Here's the containers. that would fit in those pentatonic containers. You notice lighter, well, let's start with balanced actually. Neutral or balanced. You notice that we have a note on each side. And like I said, we're only moving one note to create these new scales. And here is that one note. If we consider that we have, let's consider this like the lighter side and this the darker side. Now here we have a balance. We have one note on the lighter side and one note on the darker side. So we have a balance of light and dark. Now here we're going to slide one note to the lighter side. So hence this would turn our 5-note scale where we've added 2 notes, and this would make it sound brighter. Here we've taken our bright note and slid it to the dark side. We're going to the dark side. And that makes it the darker, gives it this darker flavor, darker emotion. But let's hear that more than just talk about it. I want you to hear this. So let's say I'm playing a G major chord. Let's get that in our ear right now. Got G in your ear now? Here I'm playing the green container. I'm playing it as it connects to this chord shape, which we'll go over in a little bit, but just focus on the container and these gut notes, and I'm playing with it right now. Gut note, container, gut note. Now notice that all those notes sound pretty congruent with the chord. I had to get back there to the root to seal the deal. So anyways, now I'm going to play the gut notes in the blue container. And let's see how it sounds when we've got that. So all we need to do is focus on that. The top line is what's changing. We got these, and we're going to call this the top line where the plus sign is, and this the bottom line. We can see the bottom line stays the same as the neutral scale we just played. So let's just focus on that top line. Here's the green. Now here's the blue. You can hear there's definitely a different emotion to just that one note. It's got more of a, to me, it cries more than the other, putting the other note in there. That just sounds like a normal step. Okay, so now let's play the orange shape. Then we have to concentrate on the bottom row. So let's try that. Now let's hear the green against our chord. Container, gut note, container. They sound like normal steps. Now let's play the other, switch that one note down, darker. Sounds like a little more doubtful. There's more worry there. Because that's kind of a clash with the chord. Because we have a tritone interval there. Now, one thing to think about there is that darker is what we said was associated with Mixolydian, right? There's the orange is Mixolydian, so that is associated with Mixolydian. You've heard of your 7th chord, and what makes that 5 chord, when you make it a 7th chord, if you're hearing these people talk about jazz, you've heard, it's got the tritone. That's what makes the 5 chord pull to the 1, that tritone. There it is. Between the 5 of the chord, that's the 3 of the chord, sorry, and the 7. And we're starting to get to how this you can, based on one chord, using these ideas inside the container, stacking your container with these notes, can turn these um, chords into either a 1, a 4, and a 5, and inform you on where the rest of the notes of the scale are for that corresponding chord on the entire fretboard. And I'll show you that in a little bit. To do that, what we want to do is know about our navigation square. And as you can see, our navigation square exists in every one of these shapes. It is very obvious in this lighter and darker mode here, the Lydian and Mixolydian, which is square here and a square here. Now in Aeolian, the square is a little bit more hidden, but I've got gray squares there to show you if you've got this, what we call the broken box here, or the balanced box, it's actually the two squares, the way that they stack on the fretboard in an angle going this way from toward never mind. But yeah, you get it. So, for example, if I was to play a square here, octave says it's right here, says it's right here. Always connected by a corner, or by that octave, by that tritone run, except the G and B string anomaly separates it by 1 fret. But anyways, you can see that we have the square there, and that's helpful to know when you can populate this based on the chords, and then you want to take this into complete navigation of your fretboard. So let's move on. Now, so here you want to know this too as well. This navigation square actually is the master shape of your fretboard, and it's actually stacked like this. So you can see you should notice that this lighter and darker, these are actually the same square of notes. So to speak, in certain ways, certain contexts is what the word I'm looking for. But anyways, just know that this is the master shape of the fretboard. If you think a beginner might say, well, Mark, my teacher taught me these 7 shapes, and they're like, and then there's this shape, and there's this shape, and there's all these big giant differentiating patterns. So it seems like you can play other notes that are not in this pattern. Well, I dare you, double dare you, to play a note that's outside this pattern, because I mean, obviously there's, the outside notes, but this geometry is all there is on your fretboard. If I play a note here, I'm somewhere in that shape based on, let's say I picked the key of C major. Well, that note is somewhere inside that shape. This note is somewhere inside that shape, whether it's in the key or out of the key. That master pattern is the little most tiniest core of scale you could get, which is the way I found mastering the guitar so easy, was just learning this little core and being able to link it up all across the neck. So, and realizing that no matter where I am, I'm somewhere in that pattern. Let's go over here. Square. Oops. Outside note. Square. Square. square, square. Everything I did, I just thought about that one pattern, navigated through it in different spaces. So we want to know about this shape now that we've become. You need to say, okay, that is real. This guy isn't lying. He's not mistaken. I wouldn't be on here on YouTube if there was some way I was not totally sure about this, because people will blow your ass out of the water if they can find a way to prove you wrong. So now you might say, oh, if this isn't the way it would be if it was harmonic minor. But technically speaking, harmonic minor only changes one note of this pattern. So while it really skews the geometry up and gives becomes its own mechanism of traveling the scale with harmonic minor, it is still very similar. And because there's only a one note change, which is the note that says M in it, it's one note that way. So, oh, harmonic minor, you say. Yes, sir. Ah, yeah. Just to know a little bit of a trick there, and you can take this into harmonic minor. Melodic minor, another one note shift, but let's not go there because I still don't have it mastered yet. It's a little tricky. And probably only used in your most ardent jazz teachings or whatever. So, anyways, this shows you the square pattern. This is for the navigational purposes that I just discussed. But you want to know this. Ionian and this never changes. This is hard and fast to this geometric code of the fretboard. Ionian, the one, is always in this square shape. Dorian is here. We have it not colored because we're going to use this Dorian for ease of use today. As a matter of fact, we're not even going to use Dorian because that's a minor mode. We're not going to use the blue, the Aeolian, the Dorian, or the Phrygian because that's for a minor mode lesson. Today we're dealing with our green notes, the ILP, the Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. Now, what about this L? Well, that's why it's got a star in it. That's that Locrian. That's always one before the Ionian because it likes to pull to the Ionian with that diminished, because it's that diminished chord. Here we can see, if you're thinking back to, well, wait a minute, did you say there's a modal order? This is how the modal order translates to your fretboard, is actually what this is also like the teaching of this page. You can see the major, and then you got a minor, and a minor way over here, and you got your major at your 1, major at your 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, major at your 5, 6 is minor, 2, 3, and 6 minor. And that's how it lays out on your fretboard. So for example, that's why that sounds so good. That's 1, 4, 5. Now let's go down, and in the same scale we're going to play, we're still in the same key, but now we're playing all the minor of it. That Phrygian being pretty tense, so it's hard to, it doesn't have that, to me, is congruent or recognizable of a sound as the 1, 4, 5 major, but it's still similar. 6, 2, 3, 2, 6, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, back to the A, because we were in the key of A. All right. Let's move on. So, how now, with that information, to take these back to those triads we've forgotten about now, those little triad shapes, and turn them into the ability to do two things. Let's do this. Two things. nail any one of those chords into either a 1, a 4, or a 5, knowing where that one note difference is, so easy, and being able to use that information to be able to play across the whole fretboard. Here we go. Also, one thing that would be helpful, back to when, a few minutes ago we talked about those 7 shapes and how I was kind of discounting them a bit. A shape that's called Aeolian, a shape that's being called Dorian, and a shape that's called Phrygian. Those shapes are very helpful to know, and those 3 shapes will help you navigate the entire fretboard. Even though you can play some in-between shapes that link up those will get you the every note of the fretboard in every note of a major scale, any major scale. Okay, so anyways, though, that being said, those will come in handy. But here's the first shape, okay? And like we discussed, there's our root note. This is our, and today, so let's go to G. Why G? Because G is easy to find because it's on the 12th fret. Or let's go to the 12th fret, so that way we know that this is G. We're playing in G. Now, what if G is my 1 chord? That's going to be my balanced chord. We know that from this information. Our 1 is always balanced. As a matter of fact, I would have been smart to put the numbers there. So 1 and 6. Remember that 2 always goes with 4 in the even pair. 1 goes with 6. And 3 goes with 5. So when you have 2 even numbers, you have the lighter. When you have a balance of 1 even number, you have your balanced scale. And when you have everything on the odd side, 3 and 5, you have your darker scales. It's another neat thing, the way the musical ideas correspond with numbers. So how can we know if this is how can we make this G? 1, 4, or 5. Okay, so 1 is green. We're going to put that, so then we would just take the container, and this is what I'm going to visualize inside that container. I'm going to play the green shape inside the container of this. We know our pentatonic is here. Or if I'm referencing just the shape there, I know on the bottom, on the bridge side, I've got a container there, and I've got a container from the other neighbor pentatonic right there. And they're an octave apart. It's the same notes. So I've got 2 playgrounds or 2 containers for this green note to work. So earlier when we were examining the tonalities to get them in our ears, this is what I used. So now I'm playing this G as a 1 chord. If this was the key of G, G major, this would be I would need this scale. But I want to take it all over the neck. How would I conceptualize that in an instant without even any thought? I look for my squares, so I know I've got a square right here. However, I don't have a string down there if I'm using this top or this box at the, I guess, bottom of the pentatonic right there. Depends on the way you think about it. Could be the top or the bottom, so that's a tough term to use. So, but anyways, I've got a box right there. I've got my broken box touching the 3 and the 1 of the chord. 3 and 1. That informs me about where all my other boxes are. And I know that that is also what I call the Aeolian shape. Now I found a box there, and I know when my box is there, I'm in my Phrygian shape. And Phrygian and Dorian are linked up. So I'm down here on the fretboard now with no thought required. And I'm back to my Aeolian shape. Pentatonic. Aeolian. Wrong note. Back to G. Did you hear the wrong note in there? I think it screwed up there. Now I'm finding also these other shapes that correspond, and I'm going to show you how to, even though I can get around the fretboard from that one teaching or one idea, the green, knowing where to put how to fill my container, I can even see everything starts to overlap. When I'll show you how to do this with the other two shapes. We're just doing it with the one shape now. There's the other two shapes, and they work the same way, just a little bit different. And the same thing happens. But let's try Mixolydian now. What if I wanted to make this my 5 chord? This is a 5 chord. What's the 5 chord? Well, underneath a 5 is always a 1. That's the standard for the fretboard. So what's underneath that 5? It's C. And C or G always leads to C. Let me let you hear that here. Here's the progression of 1 and a 6. Or 2, sorry. No, a 6. 6 minor. 1, 6 minor. 4. I went sophisticated there. You might thought he had a wrong note again, but I actually like to play my 5 chord 1 fret mistakenly up, then go down, and then go there for some modern sophistication, because you can mess around with the 5 chord like that. And so notice once I get to the 5G, it's going to pull to the 1C. So there's that explanation of now why would you want this to be a 5 chord? What does it matter? How is it going to sound different from a 1 chord? That's why some of the reasons you would want to make sure you conceptualize these chords properly, because they each have a different function in relation to their scale. Or sonically or emotionally, they're going to emote something different. So if I'm playing in the 1, a lot of Grateful Dead music is using a major chord that's based on a 5, not a 1. And when you play a chord, a scale, using the 5 as the tonic center, the tonal center, you are playing in Mixolydian, hence the letter M in the box here, hence the letter I in the balance scale for Ionian, which is where we just were. And now we're talking about the 5 chord. And we'll go into Lydian here if I stop yapping about it also. We could still be in major, because I haven't played that keynote yet. But we play the top line now. So like notice before when we played the G and made it a 7 chord to accentuate that flatted 7th on a major chord. That is that note. I have to respond to a text here. A dear friend is texting me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do something terrible in my lesson here and do something personal, but hey, that's awesome. I'm giving a I'm not giving anything. I'm recording a lesson right now, and I'll talk to you in a bit. But I'm happy to hear that you made it out on time. Okay, so sorry for the personal chat there. I'm still waiting for someone to walk in the room here, and 5. So now I've got a square right there. That informs me instantly that that's the Phrygian shape. I'm connected to the Dorian shape by that one square, because that square is this square, and it's connected to both scales. They're intermeshed, but that's been in other lessons, many other lessons about the fretboard navigation. And I want to try to end there. When I go back here, I'm turning this into a 1. But we don't want to be in C. That's a C. That's a G. You kind of want to accentuate the, because that's going to really say, hey, this is a 5 chord. Because that's the only place that those notes would occur over that chord, is in the Mixolydian scale. That you're playing the distinctive note. So cool. Let's do Lydian now. So I want this to be a 4 chord. So what would this be the 4 chord of? 4, 5, 1, D. Conceptualizing something. So this would be the 4. Wait a minute, that's wrong. So sorry. G. 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. Either way, you don't have to mess around and keep being confused with what I'm thinking about right now. Lydian. It's a distinctive note. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to think about this container right here, right now. I'm going to do the same thing. Now, would you put fill your container here with the blue and your container here with the orange? No, not in any common sense, unless your chord was changing functionality in the middle of a song, and that's very not really likely to happen because it would be kind of hard to express musically without kind of throwing the listener for a loop. You may change keys in a chord. You might jump from one to a totally different key, which at that point you may be changing to a whole different chord. So not too likely. You're going to plug in the same thing in both containers. So for here, if we're doing this, so I know across my chord, that informed me. Now I know where I am. This is Aeolian square. Oops. Using the seventh chords like a jazzer would do because these are very basic, boring kind of jazz chords. So take that loosely. But they're seventh chords, not so common in rock and pop, but more common for jazzer to include the seven because that brings out the flavor of the five and the flavor of the seven. Really brings more definition as to what chord in the scale they are because the only major chord that uses a flatted seven is the five chord. That's what makes it that unique special chord. One and the four use a major seven. So if I have a whole step up, a flatted seven going to a whole step down, major seven chord, that's clearly, undeniably a 5-4 progression because that's the only place that will happen. Now, let's say that we've gone through that enough. I feel like I could hammer it home for another hour, but let's move on to this shape here. So all we want to know now is where are our containers in relation to our shape. So if you're in this shape here, so if we wanted to be in this shape in G, let's use our octave displacement pattern to be there. There's G. So I know I got this pentatonic there. But now I want to go really define this chord. It's the 5 chord of the key. So I know right away I'm making my container orange. And I mean, in theory, I could take that 1 and move it down to a 7. I don't know. I was trying to just make it more like ear lock-in sound, but it's kind of hard when you don't have other instruments, a keyboard playing. a sequence of chords that would indicate you're putting this chord. This chord is sitting in the spot of the scale. That's the 5. Then you would unmistakably hear this. But go do yourself a favor and find some modal backing tracks on YouTube. Just search for, like, say, G Mixolydian. Find your G chord shape here and see if this holds true. That if you can go to your container and go, and then if it sounds great and you've locked it in, you're great. You've got it. Container right here. That just told me exactly where I was on the fretboard. I've got the Phrygian shape under my fingers, Aeolian shape, okay. So regardless of if I may have slipped up a note in there, but yeah, this the string gap here takes a little getting used to, so just be mindful of that. But if I was to play, here's another thing. If I was to put the orange container in the container down here, these yellow notes down here where the plus sign is, then I would know that I got a square, a broken box square. The only place that broken box square exists on the B and G string. G and B is in the Aeolian scale shape. Not so easy to make that the tonal center when when you're noodling on the major scale. We're so used to considering do as the root, the major scale. Noodling, if not done with purpose in mind, tends to want to resolve to the 1, and sometimes the 6 is maybe where you would sound. So yeah, that is why this may not have that much definition, especially to some new people new to modes and new to these sounds are probably hearing this going, what is the difference? Why would I want to know all this stuff? And but play it against modal backing tracks. So when you hear these notes lock in, like, if I played like a G Mixolydian backing track, but I plug in this green, the Ionian, there's going to be one note that sounds like a garbage note. And if you play the proper plug-in, it's going to sound like like you suddenly like locked into that music. And but it takes a specific well done backing track. Some of them, the problem with some of those YouTube backing tracks, I feel bad because some people will land on a poorly done backing track by someone who didn't know what they were doing, and it'll be harder to lock in and hear these sounds lock in the way they should. But if you hear a really well done tonal center Mixolydian, tonal center Ionian, or tonal center Lydian, then these shapes will lock in. Final shape is this one here. Oh, that's minor, by the way, but let's not go there. What is this shape? Okay, that's our blank sheet. So here, our final shape is this shape on this side. Still in G. Or if we was, let's change it up to D now. to put myself back in the middle of the fretboard there, so I'm not off the screen here. And of course, why D? Because our 1 is up here on the D string, and our easy note to find on the D string is the D at the 12th fret, because that's D. It's helpful to note that you not only have your 1 here, this is your standard 1-3-5 shape, your 1 is also at the very top. That being said, here are your 2 containers. You have a container here and a container there. 2 containers in this shape, and so we would have this. If I want to make it a 1, let's make it a 5. Did you hear me grace over a bad note there? D. That should want to resolve to a G. The 1. 5. Tried adding the 4 chord to the 5 chord and the 1 chord to the 5 chord because they sit in a certain spot that would identify that D as the 5, and that would give you more of a making that orange shape, container shape per se, more of a lock into your ear. Oh yeah, that's the right bunch of notes. If I was to make this the 1, let's play this as a 4 then. There's 5, 4, 5. Whoops. Oh, E. Sorry, I thought it was F. D, E, D, E. A is gonna be the 1. A is gonna be the 1. 4, 5, 4, 5, and 1. There's a way to do it. Play your 1, your 4, and your 5, and when you play those, all 3 of those chords, that is the blue would be theoretically the only one that works there, because if you're playing that as a 4 chord, your 5 is going to be a whole step up, and your 1 is going to be right above that, or technically below. So here's the E. Since this shape here is actually a bit of the actual 6-string bar chord that we all know and love. Then above, if that's the 5, what's directly above or below, if the way you want to look at it is from E, since we're playing an E, we went from D to E, 2 major chords, whole step apart like that, are going to have the A, because A is above E. So, like for example, and I'm calling that above because it's higher, lower string. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's lower to the ground, but it's higher in tonality. So is it lower? Is it higher? Right? But all right. So that brings us to the end here. That is how you would conceptualize, know where your container is, know how to populate your container, know how the container contains a navigation square that gets you all across the fretboard, and you are in business knowing a 1, a 4, or a 5 chord anywhere on the fretboard. And just to give you an example here, minor, excuse me, the one note here changes there. This one note was here, it shifts up a whole step that way. And the one note there, the 5, as a matter of fact, this is the 5. So the 5 was here, it moves there. The 5 was here, it moves into the 1. The 5 was here, you move it a whole step up, call it the 1, and you've got your minor scale here. So this is a representative or part of the big bar chord. We've got this set of green notes here contained in this bar chord that we all know and love. Our 5th string minor chord. Minor bar chord is what I should say. 6th string minor bar chord. And then we could call this the C shape, because you put your pinky way up there and you get the root on the D way up here. And now this one has a harder to navigate container. So you just find out, map this out, draw it on your graph paper, find out where your container is, and you know how to plug in your container. As a matter of fact, you plug in the container the same way. These are all minor shapes. You can put them on anywhere on the fretboard for any note that you need. So let's say you needed an A flat minor chord. And then that A flat was the 5 of the scale. You know how to plug it in, use that orange shape. Go back in the lesson, look at the orange shape, because it's working in a pair, Mixolydian, 5 chord major, and Phrygian. Or if it was a 3 chord, we would use the orange. If I misspoke a second ago, if it was a 6 chord, we would use the green shape. Green is Aeolian for 6 chord, and the 2 chord, the other minor, the only odd man out minor chord for the 2 chord would be the blue shape in the container, and the container is in the same spot here. So like, for example, and you're like, oh yeah, Mark, that's easy, that's the pentatonic scale. And you know that lick. That everybody overdid since 1970, 69, 68. It sounds great though, right? Well, it's, as you can see, you're bending up to a 5 and then releasing to a 3 to the 1. And it's part of the big bar chord, minor chord, and the minor pentatonic. Phrygian, Dorian, make it a 5 or a 6 chord, you say? Oh no, 6 chord, it's so confusing. Not hard at all. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Hopefully you enjoyed the probably was a good solid hour like usual. And I thank you for watching. Like because the YouTube gods like the likes, and subscribe if you haven't. Oh, by the way, thank you to all my latest subscribers. We have pushed celebration time here above 900 people. Big news for me. Small fry for YouTube creator people. Very small French fry. And um, so thank you to all those subscribers. A couple more, and we'll be at 1,000. Big deal, because then they still play commercials. I guess I don't know, but it makes me I'll be able to go live on my cell phone. I guess is what the big deal would be, and hit the notification because then you will know in your email. I think too when I get a when I put out these new lessons. So hopefully some of you people got that notification and you'll watch this as I uploaded it in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Said what I needed to say, and we'll catch you later on the next one. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Let me find the off button. All right, stop recording here. Bye.